On this week's Real Talk, we talk about getting through those trauma experiences and working towards forgiveness.
Yeah, and we spend a little bit of time on patriarchal blessings. Have you received one, and what does it mean?
All that this week on Real Talk.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Talk, Come Follow Me. Today we finish up Genesis. We're studying chapters.
We've been doing it a while,
I know,
right?
42 through 50 are the chapters we're going to be diving into today, and we're going to have more opportunities to talk about some real, somewhat heavy issues like healing from abuse. The end of the story, though, is always happy usually with these stories, and so hopefully that gives you some hope. And we're going to drop in a little bit of patriarchal blessings in this episode.
Yeah.
So excited to get into it.
And chronologically, we're about 22 years since Joseph was sold into Egypt by his brothers. So if you recall, like we inserted and now we're back, right? So we had talked about all the trials last week, including being falsely accused and imprisoned, and then seeing his brothers again, right? We're going to pick that up right here.
Well, I'd like to just recognize, it just occurs to me, like, think of how he felt when he saw his brothers. Let's just think. It's been a long time, a lot of trauma has transpired, and then the moment comes.
And it's, to me, I think it's important that chapter 37, this is where it's fulfilled all the way into chapter 42. Right. Sometimes when we're reading the scriptures, it's like we're seeing full families go through their experience within one page.
Right.
We're living it, though. That whole 22 years feels like it's dragging, and I think it's so crucial. So we're going to dive a little bit into that reunion.
Yeah.
How about that?
I'm really excited.
Okay, so do you want to set this up at all? Because we're in Genesis 42, and this is a moment where, right, verse 11, we are all one man's sons, and we are true men, and thy servants are no spies, right?
Yeah.
In this situation, the brothers are coming back, right?
There's a famine in the land.
Right, and they're needing some food.
Hello, Jesus symbol again, right? We're starving. There's only one place in all the land that can provide the sustenance we need. Joseph.
The bread, the water, the life.
In Egypt. And so they have to go now to Joseph for their well-being, for their survival.
And we're wondering, have their brothers changed much? Because once again, the Savior is offering the grace to all of us, and none of us are worthy. And here his brothers have really messed things up. But did they? Right? Did they?
Yeah. They don't recognize him.
Right.
And so he's trying to gauge these same questions you're asking.
Yeah.
He's like,
have they changed?
Have they changed? Or are they still the guys that seriously wanted to kill me but settled with selling me into slavery?
And I'm going to pose a question that I don't necessarily know if I have the answer for, but I think it's a great opportunity to have a conversation about guilt versus shame. And we've talked about it before. But in verse 21, it said, we are very guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore, in this distress come upon us. So are they feeling guilt, which is a change of behavior motivator? Or are they still in some shame? They say guilty, but shame is, I'm bad. Guilt is, I don't like the decision I made, and I want to make a change in my behavior. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you haven't seen already our Real Talk Friends episode with David Thompson, we encourage you to watch that. He's a therapist, and if for no other reason, you'll get an hour of free therapy by watching that episode.
Real.
Yeah, he has some great stuff. But in that episode, we kind of wrestle a little bit with the difference between guilt and shame. Super important.
Yeah,
are
and
Joseph's
I don't
brothers
know.
here?
Yeah.
Are they in guilt or are they in shame?
Are they ready to say, like, we see where we did wrong and we're ready to change, or we are horrible?
So I want to look at Judah.
Okay.
And maybe make an argument for him being in guilt.
Okay.
He's coming out of shame, and he really just wants to change now.
And he's had some other experiences, right?
I mean,
we talked.
Again, if you've been studying the chapters from week to week, you know Judah, up and down he goes, right, with his progression back to God, like the rest of us, I would say. In Genesis 43, Judah is standing with his brothers, right, before Joseph, and they don't know this is Joseph. They just think it's second He's not there yet. Sorry, he's actually talking in this case to his father.
Before
Right.
they're going,
he's like,
right?
let me take Benjamin back with me, right?
And his dad's like,
you ain't taking Benjamin to Egypt. Like, I don't know what happened last time with Joseph, you know?
I
He
really
never
like
came back.
Benjamin.
So obviously their dad, by the way, suspects that he wasn't just devoured by lions or whatever in the wilderness, right? He's like, something happened.
We knew you guys were resentful of his coat.
But Judah says to his father, send the lad, Benjamin, at this point, with me, and we will arise and go that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones, because Joseph has required them to go back. I'm just missing some gaps. I want people to know, you know. Joseph sends them back to get Benjamin.
There's a little bit of, there's not
Benjamin's alive.
one moment.
Right. And Judah says, I will be surety for him. I'll be insurance for Benjamin, Dad. I'm not going to let anything happen to him. Now remember, Judah, it was his idea in the first place to sell Joseph into slavery. Now some might think, yeah, well, he did him a favor because everyone else wanted to kill him. Okay, maybe. Yeah,
Or
but
he
still,
needed
he
spending
sold him
money.
into slavery, for crying out loud. He says, let Benjamin come with me. I will bring him unto thee and set him before thee. Then let me bear, if I don't, let me bear the blame of this forever. I promise you, I will get Benjamin back, Dad, no matter what.
Which is evidence probably that it was guilt and not shame.
I think he's trying to change. So I think that the past 20 plus years have been eating him alive. And this is something I just wanted to bring out in this particular story, a principle that's super important in my mind. Most of the suffering that people encounter in life is just natural consequences from poor choices. You know, for some people, it's
or
other
the choices
things,
of others.
or the choices of others, right? But they're natural consequences. I'm sometimes intrigued by some people's belief that I'll hear them talk about someone who's making horrible decisions in their life or whatever, and they're like, oh, they're going to pay for that. But I think the payment is inherent in the natural consequences that follow any given particular action, right? And the prodigal son is a great example of this. I'm trying to, let me see. It was Elder Perry, L. Tom Perry. I loved Elder L. Tom Perry. Every time he spoke, it was like listening to my grandpa speak to me or something.
I shared a hymn book with him when I was a teenager.
All
it was a
right.
little overwhelming.
There's your
because
claim to fame. He's a big
like
guy.
big guy and deep voice, and I remember shaking the hymn book the whole time. So I'm hearing his voice as you're reading this quote.
He said this, and I won't try to sound like him.
Okay.
You just hear it how you want. Men and women who ignore the gentle promptings of the Spirit will often learn, as the prodigal son learned, through the natural consequences of disobedience. It was only after natural consequences humbled the prodigal son that he came to himself and heard the whisperings of the Spirit telling him to return to his father's house. And so I would just say, well, there's a proverb. This is what I'll say.
Okay.
And it says this, rejoice not when thine enemy falleth. Let not thine heart be glad when he stumbles. I think that's just one way of saying the punishment is inherent in the act. Wickedness never was happiness. And if someone is choosing darkness over the light, they are suffering. Can we just assume it and know it?
It's already built into the computer programming.
I love that. I love your metaphor of how God has started this computer program and it's running.
And mercy
part of that
can override the programming, right?
I just love it. And so I just give people grace. I give them benefit of the doubt. I know that no matter how happy someone pretends to be, choosing darkness over light, I know that in the quiet moments when they're alone, it's dark and it's painful and there's a degree of suffering. They don't need more suffering from me. They don't need me to be the shame monster to impose more punishment, more suffering.
They're feeling
That's built in. My job is to love and to understand.
We talked about one of our movies that we share that we like is The Shack, and I think it depicts this perfectly, where you kind of see your enemy and how it plays out.
It's so humbling and so difficult. I don't want to oversimplify because
it's a painful process.
If we're talking about people that have been abused or hurt, or it's hard not to really look for, I can't wait till that person gets what's coming to him kind of thinking, right? Joseph Smith had a lot of reasons he might have been, you guys are getting what's coming to you one day.
Another Joseph, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes from Joseph Smith is this, think of all that he had suffered at the hands of others.
Friends.
Yes, all the betrayal, all the trauma. And this is what he said. It is my disposition to give and to forgive, to bear and to forbear, with all longsuffering and patience, with the foibles, follies, weaknesses, and wickedness of my brethren and all the world of mankind. When you and I meet face to face, I anticipate, without the least doubt, that all matters between us will be fairly understood, and perfect love prevail, and the sacred covenant by which we are bound together have the uppermost seat in our hearts. That
So
to me
great.
is just living in a state of constant love and understanding, and whether you like what that individual's doing right now or not, to themselves or to you or to others, just know that the suffering is inherent in the programming of life, right? We don't need to pile it on. Instead, let's try to remain in a space of love and forgiveness, like Joseph Smith. And that's what Joseph of Egypt is obviously
Right.
struggling with right here in this moment in Genesis. I want to forgive, but it's
Have
just
they really
so hard back.
changed?
Yeah, just back
and
and forth.
sometimes we want to offer the forgiveness after we have evidence that there's change, right?
Right,
And I
right.
think in the repentance process, there's so much peace that can come, but it's only through Christ. Should we jump?
Yeah.
Beloved Benjamin,
Benjamin, the youngest.
the son of beloved Rachel.
Right. So,
full
Joseph's,
circle,
Joseph's,
right?
Joseph's, full brother
Yes,
through Rachel.
right.
Yeah, the only two boys through Rachel. Rachel died giving birth to Benjamin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a fun fact, but
No, yeah.
that's what came to mind as you just said that. So Genesis 43, verse 27, and thy servant my father said unto us, ye know that my wife bare me 2 sons. And there is a little Benjamin game that I play. There is a phrase called, are you the Benjamin of the family? And it kind of comes back to this principle that Rachel bore 2 sons, but the youngest was Benjamin. I have a younger brother, shout out to Ben, and his name is Ben. And I have played this game and sometimes freaked out like random repair guys that come to my house. If I happen to meet you and I don't know you and your name's Benjamin, I'll say, hey, can you help me with something? Do you happen to be the youngest boy in your family? I'm going to tell you, John, I've been probably playing the Benjamin game 10 years. That's what I call it. 90% of the time, it is the youngest brother. And they look at me like I'm a prophetess. They're like, wait, how did you know I was the youngest boy? And it's because of this. There is some research. I tried to find the research. I can't find it, but just trust me.
Trust her.
Trust me.
She's a valid source.
Yes, that traditionally speaking, there is a higher percentage of youngest boys named Benjamin in families in the world.
Fascinating.
And I just think it's fascinating because he's the youngest of all the tribes, of all the boys. And that is just a little extra light thought for this week's heavy
Well,
discussion.
no doubt Joseph sees Benjamin maybe more closely connected to himself than any other, right?
Maybe, yeah.
And maybe that's also part of it. Like, you bring back my younger brother and prove to me you haven't done to him what you did to me. And then maybe he's struggling with
And I don't think there's anything wrong with trust with verification. And I think there's some healthy boundaries in that. And maybe
not
that's
necessarily being,
yeah, you're not
vindictive about
being
this.
lack of forgiving, but you're also trying to check to see where's our relationship.
Well, I love this moment.
Okay.
They finally convince Jacob to let him take Benjamin. They take Benjamin and they show him to Joseph. They still don't know this is Joseph. Joseph comes out. He lifted up his eyes. This is Genesis 43, 29 and 30. And he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spake unto me? He might not have actually recognized him now that I think about it because it's been so long, right?
Yeah. And especially those years, if he was young when Joseph left.
You know how different.
Yeah.
I show my students a picture of me when I was a senior in high school. They still don't believe it's me.
Or me in my 80s hair.
Anyway, Joseph says to Benjamin, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And then he has to run out of the room. This is so touching to me. Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. He entered into his chamber, and he just weeps there, just bursts into tears. And this, to me, just sort of speaks to this, no matter how much trauma we've experienced in a family, this desire to be reunited with
No matter
them
what.
and healed and in a space of love and understanding is so powerful. You just can't, it won't ever leave us. And that's what we see Joseph struggling with here. He wants that. Well, and here we started with Judah earlier. Was he really,
Guilt
genuine?
or shame. Mm-hmm.
This is where it really proves to me that he's really in a healthy place trying to change. Joseph in an attempt to kind of test them one more time in Genesis 44, 33 through 34. This is where Judah responds, but Joseph says, I'm going to keep Benjamin or whatever. And Judah's like, no way. I promised my dad I'm bringing
will lose
him
it.
home.
Yeah.
He goes, in Genesis 44, 33, 34, therefore I pray thee, let thy servant, let me abide instead of the lad. Let me be your servant. I'll be your slave for the rest of my life. And let the lad go back home with my brethren, for how shall I go to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father. And he's just like, no, I will do anything to avoid the pain I caused my family before. Please take me, make me a slave if you need to. I love that.
Anything else you want to talk about healing?
No.
Okay.
No.
I think right there's this moment, right? Genesis 45, 14. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. So context right there, right? They are...
Walls come down, finally.
Walls come down, right? And as we go into Genesis 46, there's this continued reunion. His sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters, his sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with them into Egypt. And so there's this big reunion, this reconciliation. And in verse 29 of 46, and Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his
Can
father.
you imagine? Beautiful.
And I guess I'm just feeling like for all of us that have had that, we invited you a few weeks ago to maybe start the process of reconciliation. I hope someone within our viewing audience had that experience. And what a beautiful reconciliation and moment. Can you imagine what Israel felt? Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
Everybody felt in this huge trauma.
Yeah.
They've been living in this pain and hurt for so long. I believe this story is a representation of the end of all of our stories.
For sure.
Eventually, through the atoning grace of Jesus Christ, we can all come to this point sooner or later as families, as friends, as communities. I really just love sort of the metaphorical symbolism here.
And that Israel is meaning let God prevail,
Let
right?
God prevail.
And when, to quote President Nelson, when we choose to let God prevail in our lives or not, we can choose to let him be the most powerful influence in our lives or not. We can choose that. When I wrote the Let God Prevail booklet, I missed in the editing process, there was a back and forth with my editor, and I've shared this before, I had missed that part, that it's about our choice. And I think if we really get all the story, we're going to see how they had to keep choosing to let God prevail during that time of grief and separation.
It's a constant choice from day to day. Well, this is maybe a good time just to have a quick little side note. So Jacob comes with all of his posterity. Israel now settles in Egypt. This is going to set us up for Exodus, as the children of Israel now live in Egypt for how many hundreds of years. And, you know, they don't stay on good terms forever with the Egyptians.
There's a whole story coming,
But before Jacob dies in Egypt, he decides to give all of his children a patriarchal blessing. And you can read these patriarchal blessings to his 12 sons in Genesis 49. So good opportunity maybe this week with your family to talk about patriarchal blessings using Genesis 49. And something just to, I just want to make sure that we are careful in how we talk about patriarchal blessings.
Yes.
Sometimes we create expectations that are not real or accurate, and so we set people up for disappointment with these. What a patriarchal blessing is and what it's not is pretty important. I like what the church says, and this is on the church's website. It says this: a patriarchal blessing provides inspired direction from the Lord. Patriarchal blessings include a declaration of a person's lineage in the house of Israel and contain personal counsel from the Lord. I love the declaration of lineage. This is how you are connected back to Father Abraham through one of the 12 sons of Joseph. And then this part. A lot of people are set up to think a patriarchal blessing is going to give you all the secrets of your life and give you all the choices you need to make in your life right here, right?
A GPS.
Yes. It says this: while a patriarchal blessing contains inspired counsel and promises, it should not be expected to answer all of the recipient's questions or to detail all that will happen in his or her life. If the blessing does not mention an important event, such as a full-time mission or marriage, the person should not assume that he or she will not receive that opportunity. And so just the power of a patriarchal blessing doesn't come, and the specificity, I would say, of a patriarchal blessing doesn't come through the patriarch. It comes through that individual using the blessing as a springboard to go to God and receive further light and knowledge throughout their entire life. I say this because when I was 20, I think, I got my patriarchal blessing. And it was the most anticlimactic experience of my life because I had this sort of traditional...
Some real talk now.
Yeah, I had this anticipation of like, you will do this and you will do that and all these
turn
grandiose
left, turn right.
prophecies. Instead, it seemed very general to sort of the flavor of John, be good. John, choose the right. John, if you choose wrong, it won't be good. Amen. That's how it felt. Right. But I will say this, like so many other people over the past 27 years of my life, as I have used that blessing that I thought was benign and kind of bland, as I've used that as a springboard into asking God for more questions about my life,
as a Leo,
that patriarchal blessing has popped with meaning and profundity that I never saw or dreamed of as a 20-year-old young man. And so
I think it's such a great, especially for those in your home that may not have received one yet. Yeah. And it's why these episodes are 20 minutes-ish.
Yeah, right.
We don't want to spell out as you were talking, I'm like, that's exactly what Real Talk is about, is are there things that allow the Spirit to guide and direct? Can it grow for this week for you in these episodes and conversations? So I think it's beautiful to note that in verse 22, it talks
specifically
Joseph's
patriarchal blessing.
Joseph's patriarchal blessing. Joseph is told that Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, and whose branches run over the well. And I think it's interesting to know that my son wrote me on his mission and said, Mom, do you know where the fulfillment of Joseph's tribe is and his blessing? And I'm like, Cam, where? He's like, the Book of Mormon. Yeah. It was in the Americas. And I think it's so beautiful to consider that, with the Bible and the people of Jewish descent, right? That we see where the fulfillment of this patriarchal blessing happens through reading the Book of Mormon. Yeah,
I love how Joseph's sort of a blessing was split between his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he is the fruitful bough, right? The vines that go over the well and cross the ocean to the everlasting
over
hills.
The well, the literal water body. Yeah.
And I love how through Manasseh we get Lehi and the Book of Mormon, right? And then through Ephraim we get the missionaries, kind of the Latter-day missionary force. So we have Ephraim, missionaries, Manasseh, Book of Mormon, the tool of the gathering. Here we are together, the tribe of Joseph, going out in the world and trying to bring people into the covenant line. Beautiful.
Yes. Genesis 50, should we end there?
Let's do it. Let's end with some beautiful forgiveness.
Some forgiveness. It's not until this chapter that maybe we kind of see everything. So verse 17, we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him.
Oh, he finally got what I can't.
Yeah, the
To
sorry.
hear that real,
that sorry,
genuine sorry.
And then verse 21, now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly with them. I think what a beautiful...
He comforted them.
He comforted them. So he could have been, I think back to what Nephi and he are probably talking about. Right. We know where Nephi quickly forgave. But here not only does he forgive, he saves them and feeds them.
That's beautiful.
So beautiful. Should we invite?
Yeah, well, our invitation this week, we wanted to kind of go back and focus just on this little side note of the patriarchal blessing, because we think it could be something really productive.
Because you shared with me that someone that you knew in their 60s thought it was too late.
I knew somebody that was in their 60s and they hadn't received their patriarchal blessing, and they said, why bother now? Patriarchal blessings are eternal blessings. We say they apply to this life and the next, and so we would encourage you, if you haven't received a patriarchal blessing, to consider getting it. Yeah. And if you have received your patriarchal blessing, maybe pull it out this week and do some...
more expansive view of it, that it's a living, breathing document. We're so grateful you joined us this week on Real Talk, and we'll see you again next week on Real Talk. Come follow me.
Do you like Real Talk? Come follow me.
Then like and subscribe.